Too Old to Die Young is written and directed by Nicolas Winding Refn, and its most notable actors are Miles Teller and Jenna Malone. So obviously, Too Old to Die Young was something that I was highly anticipating. I was extremely looking forward to it because I am a pretty huge fan of Refn. As you can see, I own Only God Forgives, The Neon Demon, and Drive. I absolutely love all those films. And yes, Only God Forgives. I know that Only God Forgives gets a bad rep, but I really do like that film a lot, and I think there's a lot of things to really appreciate about it. I totally get why people wouldn't like it, though. Like, if you don't like Only God Forgives, I don't hate you or anything. I can totally get why you don't. But, like I said, I just think it's a really unique film, and I just personally found quite a bit of enjoyment out of it. But that being said, Too Old to Die Young is actually not a film per se. At least it's not a conventional film, because it's basically a TV show that aired on Amazon Prime, and luckily I'm bumming off Prime for my dad, so I was able to watch it. And it's basically 13 hours of Refn in all of its glory. And each episode is an hour to an hour and a half long, so basically each episode is on par with what a feature-length film would be. The only episode that isn't that long is the final episode. It's about 30 minutes long. But besides that, it's basically almost feature-length with each episode. So when I first heard that Refn was coming out with a TV series instead of a film, I didn't really know how to feel about it. I guess I was kind of bummed out because I'm not really a TV guy. I don't really have the time to really invest myself into long TV shows. So I was a little bit bummed out, but when I started hearing that each episode was almost feature-length and it's almost 13 to 14 hours worth of material, I got kind of excited because I'm like, well, damn, this is maybe a bit more satisfying than just getting a film, because I'm getting 13 hours worth of Refn material. So the only thing that could drag it down is if it's not good. But luckily it wasn't bad, because for me, I personally found this to be a blast. I thought this was a really fantastic piece of filmmaking. I guess I can just call it a piece of filmmaking, because it really is just kind of one long film. And in a way, it tries to mimic TV and how they structure their stuff, but this really felt like a 13-hour film. And I absolutely loved it. I just had such a fun time with this series, and I'm not saying that it's perfect or anything, but I found a lot of its craft to be quite masterful, to be honest. I mean, just like any kind of Refn film, it has the aesthetic value that you would want. I mean, the score by Cliff Martinez is obviously incredibly unique, and again gives the film a more of a surreal, otherworldly feel on top of it just being gritty. The camera work, my god, the cinematography in this is the best that I've seen all year, and I could almost confidently say that even though we're only halfway done with the year, that it's probably going to be the best camera work that I'll see all year, because it was just absolutely astonishing. Every frame of this is so purposefully placed. And I know I say this a lot, but I think the golden standard for camera work is if you can basically pause a film at any moment and make a picture out of it and just hang it up in your wall somewhere. Because that's what this series is. Like, every single frame of this is masterful. And I was just really impressed with that. And also Refn's direction. You know what? Since I'm talking about Refn's direction, let me just go ahead and say this. Too Old to Die Young is a series that I think Refn fans will absolutely love and be satisfied with. Other than that, I don't know. It's honestly up for grabs, because I can see casuals not being able to really like this because of its pace. And I can also see film lovers who aren't into Refn's films to begin with not being too into it because of its pace and overall direction. Because the pace has to do with Refn's direction. And here's what I'll say about the pace, guys. If you love Refn, and you basically love all three of these films, or at least The Neon Demon and Drive, I think you're gonna have no problem with this, because there's only maybe a few moments in this entire series that I feel like the pausing in between dialogue and the pacing of a scene is just unfairly testing somebody's patience, because there are a few kind of Only God Forgive moments kind of splattered into this series that I feel like, again, I can totally get why somebody would be frustrated with the amount of pausing that is sustaining during a scene. Like, there's a few scenes within this entire series where the dialogue is paced like, "Oh hey, whose house is that?" "That's my friend's house, Dante." "Thanks." And it really is like that. I'm not exaggerating. There really are a few moments in the series where I feel like the pacing in between the dialogue is just maybe a bit too much and does kind of give that only God forgives feel. But for me, the vast majority of the series, when it comes to Refn's direction, when it comes to the pacing, when it comes to the slow camera movements, when it comes to the spacing between the dialogue, when it comes to the character exchanges, all of that really gives you what you would love out of a Refn film. It's really mesmerizing, it's hypnotic, it's purposeful, it really sets up this incredibly immersive atmosphere that you would expect from a Refn film. And I can see Refn fans really enjoying this, and I'm so happy that all 13 hours of it I found really enjoyable. And if you're a fan of Refn's neon cord type style when it comes to the lighting, this film just goes absolutely haywire with the neon lights, because there are just complete sequences of nothing but really flashy neon lights, and even where you wouldn't really expect for there to be a neon light, he somehow finds a way to try to naturally incorporate that purple blue kind of neon light going on. And again, I just found it to be a really mesmerizing piece because the aesthetic value is just absolutely top notch. And I was also a huge fan when it comes to the direction of the camera in this film, because like I tried to mention earlier, there is a lot of slow panning in this film, and there's a lot of slow moving like 360 shots in this. There's also a bunch of tracking shots in this, and it's just, I felt all of it was just it was utilized very well, in the sense that it really captivated me and really immersed me into each sequence that it was trying to convey. And I really dug it. I love how subtle and meticulous Refn's direction is, and how he kind of forces everybody to, be patient with the film and not just expect instant reward when you're watching it. And I love that, in this kind of ADD type generation that we're kind of growing up in, we still have stuff like this that forces people to kind of not have that kind of instant gratification and just to sit and let scenes sink in, and this film definitely does that. And to be fair, I can honestly see a lot of people finding this series to be confusing at times, because the way that it's directed and the way that it's structured, it'll show you a scene, but it won't give you the context of why the scene is happening until maybe the next scene or sometime later during the episode. And I can see that being kind of frustrating for some viewers, because you're sitting there watching a real slow moving scene and it's captivating, but you're just wondering what you're watching and how this relates to anything, until maybe 15 minutes later, then you find out, oh, that's what that was. So again, this is something that you kind of have to bear with and be patient with, and in terms of trying to understand what some of the plot details are, because some things aren't necessarily revealed to you during the moment, and you have to wait until the episode goes along in order for you to understand what that scene was. And also, there's quite a bit of disturbing graphic content in this. Not only is it just pretty violent at some parts, just in terms of overall like gore and blood and stuff like that, but it's really the context and some of the content that it goes in there's stuff in here just kind of like incestuous, abuse behavior resulting in a character, having this bad obsession with his mother. There's stuff in this movie that has to do with rape pornography. I'll get into that later when I'm going to the episodes, but God, that was probably some of the toughest Refn material that I've had to sit through. It doesn't visually show you any of that or anything. You're not going to see like rape porn or anything, but the context and how it conveyed a certain situation was really frightening and really disturbing to watch and sit through, because you're just like on the edge of your seat the entire scene, because with Refn, you don't know how things are going to unfold, and you're just sitting there like, my God. There's also quite a bit of dialogue exchanges in this movie that deal with that kind of disturbing context within their conversations. So, this is not any surprise to a Refn fan, but if you're not used to Refn's films and you're just watching this just for a general review, whether or not you should watch it, just go into it knowing that this does deal with some pretty disturbing contextual stuff. And one thing that I absolutely loved about the series too is that the female characters in this were incredibly strong. Jenna Malone's character, this lady right here, you might recognize her from the Neon Demon. She plays a really interesting supernatural type mystical character. I'm not going to give away exactly what it is, but it's kind of like a medium type character, and I thought the way that she was incorporated into the movie was interesting. Like, at first, you're kind of like, okay, this is kind of taking a weird supernatural angle, but again, kind of like with most Refn films, you kind of just have to roll with some of the routes that it's going in, because by the end of it, you'll most likely be satisfied with it. But yeah, her character I felt was really strong. And there's also another really strong female lead that plays a character named Yaditsa, or the High Priestess of Death. She's right there. I believe her name is Christina Rodolo. She was probably my most favorite character in the entire series. I thought she was a really interesting character. Really mystical, insightful, and I don't know, I love the way her character was conveyed, because one thing that you know about Refn is that he really knows how to create subtle filmmaking. Is that he really knows how to convey character insight, character depth, and just overall themes in a really subtle way. And Yaritsa's character was just so badass and just so incredibly intimidating. And for an actress that I never really heard of, she just does an incredible job. And I gotta give more praise to Refn here, because a lot of these actors in this, besides Miles Teller and Jenna Malone, you've never heard of. And they all do an incredible job. They all feel incredibly believable in this film. And they're really, really good. And it's just kind of surprising, because you would expect there to be some kind of lacking performance somewhere within this plethora of just unknown actors. But they all did a phenomenal job. And again, huge praise to Refn there. And on top of them just giving a good performance, a lot of their characters are really, really cool and have a lot of interesting insight to them. And they're not just throwaway characters. Even characters that he gives insight to, you might just see die off all of a sudden out of nowhere. And you're just like, holy shit, that was ballsy. We're not going to see that character anymore. But, it's just, I was really impressed with the way Refn dealt with all these characters in the series. Because for me, there wasn't a single character that I can even think of that was lacking in depth and just felt like some sort of dumb throwaway character. They're all very useful and very purposeful to what this film is trying to do. Now, for the people that do watch it all the way, I can see tons of people walking away from how this film concludes. They can walk away from it being pretty disappointed and let down, because, the conclusion doesn't really give you the kind of character resolutions and kind of character arc fulfillments and just overall plot resolutions. It doesn't really give you much of what you would want out of a 13-hour investment. And I can see people walking away from that just being really let down. But when I went into this, I never expected Refn to wrap things up so cleanly and in a bow. So it didn't really throw me off. And honestly, the last episode has one of the most badass scenes that we see throughout the entire series. And I really dug the hell out of it. And in a way, it does conclude things. Like, sure, you can go on and explore more. And honestly, I'm kind of hope that Refn makes either another season or maybe another movie, like a full-length movie that kind of works off of how this ended. Because there's a lot to explore even after this. And it would be really cool to see him explore that. But in a way, it does conclude. It just concludes the way it wants to. And it doesn't conclude in the way that most people would expect a 13-hour investment to include. But it didn't really bother me, and I kind of really did enjoy the last episode of this. So I was going to give a rundown of each episode and tell you guys what I think about it, but I feel like I just maybe doing a little too much, and it's kind of redundant because I kind of really like them all, and I kind of want you guys just to go watch it for yourself and find out. But if I had to pick a favorite or one that just comes to mind that I really, really enjoyed, maybe episode 4. I believe this is the episode where Kojima gives a cameo in it. And the way that his character is incorporated in the episode, I thought was just really fun and also just really brutal at the same time. But I just thought it was a really interesting way to kind of put him into the series. And also just a warning, episode 5, the first 5 minutes of episode 5, that's the one that does have probably the most disturbing thing I've probably seen in any Refn film. The context that is portrayed in it and the way that the dialogue is delivered and the way that the overall scene is directed. it's just really disturbing and quite unsettling. Even for someone like me who watches a lot of shit, it's still kind of hard to watch. But it doesn't show anything like, obviously, like visually graphic, but just the context and the way it's conveyed. It's pretty unsettling, so just be prepared for that. So I know that I got a different shirt on, and it's probably freaking everybody out right now. But I had to come back to this review later because I realized after I finished up my review that there were a few important things that I just didn't mention. The first one being that this actually has quite a bit of comedy in it. And most of the comedy in this comes from the police background of Miles Teller and the workforce that he's a part of. And I found that to be really refreshing for a Refn film, because usually you don't get a lot of comedy when it comes to Refn's material, but the comedy in this also serves as kind of satire, because you could read into the comedy in terms of how the police force conduct themselves, and you can read into that as a certain statement about our country in America. And I just thought that was something that was really cool to point out, because I don't think much people are going to expect that going into this. And on top of that, one thing that I also was pleasantly surprised by, and I thought was really impressive that Refn actually put detail into this, was the fact that the Spanish that is being spoken throughout this entire film, it's really awesome, because it's not just normal professional sounding Spanish. I mean, all the Spanish that you hear is actual like Mexican slang. And me, as someone who did grow up with that kind of slang, it was absolutely on point, and it sounded so authentic. I just thought it was really cool that he made sure to have that kind of dialect and that kind of slang when it comes to his characters, because it made them a lot more believable. And on top of that, again, it was pretty refreshing for me to actually hear a film care about what type of Spanish is being spoken, because some films don't give a shit about that. They just say, okay, you speak Spanish? Okay, we'll have a character that's Mexican, he just speaks normal Spanish. No, people from different parts of Mexico have different dialects. They have different kind of slang that you use. And again, that's just one thing that I really did love about it. And also, there's quite a bit of metaphorical symbolism that's kind of woven throughout this film. For instance, there's like a part where there's an upside down American flag that's covered in blood in the background. And you can read into that as obviously showing the kind of corrupt, twisted nature of our country when it comes to law enforcement and trying to protect our people. And again, there's a lot of neat stuff that's kind of woven throughout this film, and I know that's not really much of a surprise to Refn fans, but I just thought I'd mention that this does have some pretty unique symbolism that is woven throughout this film. So overall, it was an absolute blast to watch this. I felt kind of privileged to be able to watch 13 hours worth of Refn material nonstop, and I was quite upset when it was over, because I wanted to see more. Just like any good TV show, when it's over, you want to see more.
We want more. Like, you really like it, you want more.
And like I said, I really hope that Refn at some point in the future decides to build on it, because the way that it ends, it's left with, there's definitely room for him to explore. So I'm going to give Too Old to Die Young a 9 out of 10. I honestly can't see any Refn fan being disappointed by this. I mean, sure, maybe some might like it more than others, but I don't see how a Refn fan could walk away from this being unsatisfied, because it just gives you everything that you would want out of a Refn film. So I'm not sure exactly how many people have actually watched the entire thing at this point. I'm sure it's really not that many people, to be honest. I'm pretty sure not even Refn fans have gotten the chance to really watch all of it yet. But if you have, I would really like to know what your thoughts are about it. I haven't really talked to much people who have watched it, so please let me know what you think about the series in the comment section below. And if you really liked what I had to say about Too Old to Die Young, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.